That Wednesday night felt unusually quiet, quieter than I could remember. Andre, my husband, had left earlier in the week for a work commitment that would keep him away for nearly a week. He had been excited about the opportunity, and I did my best to mask how much I didn't want to be alone for such an extended time. When he left, I forced a smile, gave him a kiss, and wished him good luck, even though my chest tightened as soon as the door closed behind him. The first few days passed quietly. I worked from home, binge-watched a few series, and even took some walks around the neighborhood to break the monotony. But by the third day, the silence began to settle in, a weight that was hard to ignore. At first, the stillness had felt peaceful, like a breath of fresh air, but soon it started to gnaw at me. The house, which had always been my sanctuary, now felt cold and distant, as if something essential had been taken away. That evening, I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with a steaming cup of tea in hand, trying to settle into the quiet. But the stillness of the house, which had once been soothing, now felt suffocating, like I was waiting for something to fill the space. And then, just as I was lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang, slicing through the quiet like a knife. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I stood up quickly and glanced out the window, half expecting to see something suspicious, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I took a deep breath and opened the door, hesitating for just a moment. To my surprise, there stood Ricardo, an old friend of Andre's, holding a bottle of wine and wearing his trademark warm smile. "Hi, Marina. I thought I'd stop by and check on you," he said, his voice casual but friendly, with that natural ease that he always seemed to have. "Ricardo? What a surprise," I replied, a little caught off guard but trying to sound at ease. "You didn't have to come all the way out here." Though I felt a bit uncomfortable, I invited him inside. Ricardo and Andre had been close friends for years, but I had never really spent much time alone with him. Our interactions had always been brief, confined to group gatherings or casual dinners. So having him there in the living room, without Andre, felt both strange and oddly intriguing. We sat down on the couch, and Ricardo opened the bottle of wine. The sound of the wine pouring into the glasses was oddly comforting, filling the silence with a soft, rhythmic quality. We began talking, and much to my surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Ricardo asked about my work, showing genuine interest, and shared stories from his own life, some I had already heard from Andre, and others that were completely new to me. His storytelling was captivating. He had this natural charm, a way of speaking with his hands and facial expressions that drew you in, making every word feel like it mattered. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed so much. For the first time in days, the weight of the silence was lifted, and in its place, there was a lightness that made the evening feel a little less lonely. But as the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice something subtle in the way he looked at me. It wasn't the familiar gaze of a friend. There was an intensity behind his eyes, something deeper, as if he were trying to understand me on a level beyond casual conversation. His focus was unwavering, and in that moment, it felt like I was the only person in the room, the only person who mattered. I felt intrigued, confused, and, if I were being honest, flattered. The atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, the lines between friendship and something else blurring, though nothing was said aloud. The evening had taken on a new dynamic, one that I knew would linger in my mind for a long time. As midnight drew near, I smiled politely and thanked him for his company, letting him know that it was time for bed. "Of course," he said with a soft chuckle, rising from the couch. "I didn't mean to keep you up. It was really nice talking to you, Marina. We should do this more often." I walked him to the door, and as I closed it behind him, I stood there for a moment, staring at the silence that had once again descended over the house. The weight of it was different now, more palpable, more profound. I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease, unsure of what I had just experienced or what it might mean for the days ahead. The visit had left something unsettled in me, a feeling I couldn't quite define. The moment I woke up the next morning, an unusual restlessness lingered in the air, not fear nor anxiety, but an indefinable tension. While brewing my coffee, thoughts of Ricardo's visit crept into my mind. The conversation, the laughter, and most notably, the way he looked at me, repeated over and over in my thoughts. It felt strange. After all, he was just a friend of Andre's, wasn't he? Nothing more. Yet, the sensation refused to fade. To push away the discomfort, I threw myself into work, but as my eyes drifted to the couch where we had talked the night before, it seemed different, as though it was holding on to the echoes of that evening. The empty wine bottle on the counter felt like a silent reminder of everything that had transpired. It was late by the time I decided to distract myself by organizing the cabinets, hoping to fill my mind with anything but the lingering presence of the visit. Suddenly, the vibration of my phone broke the silence. I picked it up and saw a message from Ricardo. "I hope I didn't bother you yesterday. I really enjoyed our conversation." My thumb hovered over the screen, unsure of how to reply. I typed one response, deleted it. Typed another, deleted it again. Finally, I sent something simple. "Of course, not at all. It was nice to have company." Almost immediately a reply came. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to come back tomorrow. There's something about Andre that I forgot to tell you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts." I read the message several times, trying to understand why he hadn't mentioned this the night before. Why did he feel the urgency now? Even though his words seemed innocent, something in the tone of his message sent my heart racing. There was an unspoken tension in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Despite the unease, another part of me, perhaps driven by curiosity or the need for company, found myself typing back, "Okay, I'll be here tomorrow." The rest of the day felt like an eternity. I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a simple visit from Andre's friend. But somehow, cleaning the house felt more deliberate than usual. I moved pillows around, wiped down the coffee table, and even prepared a dinner that seemed just sophisticated enough, though casual enough not to seem like I was overdoing it. When the doorbell rang the next evening, my heart skipped a beat. I took a steadying breath before opening it. There stood Ricardo, holding a bag of food, his easy smile at odds with the tension I felt inside. "I brought dinner," he said with a casual warmth as he stepped inside. We settled at the table, the conversation flowing naturally like two old friends reconnecting. Yet something was different this time. Each laugh carried a weight. Each glance seemed to last longer than necessary. And when the silence finally stretched between us, he looked at me in a way that made time stand still. "Marina," he began, his voice low, serious, "can I be honest with you?" "Of course," I replied, though my pulse quickened, uncertainty rising. "Being here with you is harder than I thought," he continued. "You're special. I've always thought that, but never had the chance to say it. I was paralyzed, unsure of how to respond. My instinct screamed at me to stop him, to end it before it went any further, but a part of me, the same part that had allowed him into my home, was almost curious to hear what he had to say. "Ricardo, I think you're reading this wrong," I finally managed, my voice shaky but firm. I don't think this is a good idea." "Maybe," he said, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips, "but I can't ignore how I feel." His words hung in the air, thick with tension, as my mind raced, scrambling for the right thing to say. Deep down, I knew this conversation had crossed a line it shouldn't have. "Ricardo," I said, my voice now stronger, "I think it's best if you leave." Without a word, he nodded, stood up slowly, as if reluctant to leave. At the door, he paused and turned to look at me one last time. "Please, take care of yourself." "And I'm sorry," he murmured, before stepping out into the night. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it as a flood of emotions crashed over me. Sadness, relief, regret, all tangled together. I knew I had done the right thing, but that didn't make it any easier. Over the next few days, I tried to get back to my normal routine, but Ricardo's visit lingered. The wine bottle still sat on the kitchen counter. The sofa where we had sat seemed to hold his presence, and even the air felt charged with his absence. It was as though he was still there, lingering in every corner of my home. That experience left me with a realization I couldn't fully explain. It had shown me how vulnerable we are to feelings we don't always understand, and how easily boundaries can be crossed when emotions start to surface, even when we don't expect them to. Despite the difficulty of it all, I knew I had to move on, carrying with me the lessons of that moment, a confusing yet oddly significant encounter. Looking back, I wonder if I made the right choice. Did I do the right thing by stopping something before it went too far? Even though I allowed my husband's friend into my house alone, I never allowed things to cross the line. Would you say I made the right decision?